Hannah had spent months working on it. The blueprint for what was supposed to be their future. Every line, every detail had been carefully thought out, a reflection of the life she and Ethan had once dreamed of building together. She had poured her heart into it, sketching out the open spaces, the natural lighting, the reading nook she knew he would love. It was meant to be a surprise, a gift that symbolized everything they had worked toward. But as she carefully unrolled the large sheet of paper on the dining table, Ethan barely glanced at it. He was sitting at the head of the table, still in his crisp suit, scrolling through his phone with the bored detachment he had perfected over the years. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. "What's this?" he asked, as if she had just placed a meaningless document in front of him instead of a labor of love. "It's a blueprint," Hannah said, her voice filled with nervous excitement, "for a dream home. I've been working on it in my spare time, and Ethan cut her off with a sigh, tossing his phone onto the table. "Hannah, seriously? A blueprint? What am I supposed to do with this?" Her heart sank. "I thought you'd be excited. We've talked about this for years, Ethan. I even found the perfect land." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Let me guess. You actually bought it?" Hannah hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "You did, didn't you?" His laughter was cold, condescending. "Unbelievable. You spent money on a patch of dirt instead of something useful? Jesus, Hannah." She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not just a patch of dirt. It's ours. Or at least, it was supposed to be." Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple like she was an inconvenience. "God, you just don't get it, do you? He gestured dismissively at the blueprint. "This is exactly why this isn't working anymore." The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. "What do you mean?" Ethan exhaled sharply, standing up and running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I mean, I can't do this anymore, Hannah. You're stuck in this fantasy world where emotions and sentimental gestures actually mean something. Meanwhile, I'm out there making real things happen. I need someone who matches that energy, who adds excitement to my life, not someone who drags me down with this desperate attempt to make something out of nothing." The words stung more than she wanted to admit. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table as she struggled to process what he was saying. "There's someone else," Ethan continued, and this time he didn't even sound apologetic. "Her name is Isabel. She's 26, she travels the world, she actually knows how to have fun, and honestly, she makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years." Hannah stared at him, disbelief turning into something heavier, something solid in her chest. He had been planning this. He wasn't just leaving. He had already moved on. And yet, instead of falling apart, she surprised herself. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Ethan frowned. "What's so funny?" Hannah stood up, her confidence returning in waves. "You really think you're walking away with the upper hand here, don't you?" She turned to the blueprint, running a hand over it before reaching into the folder beside it. With deliberate slowness, she pulled out the deed to the land she had purchased, the land that would have been for their dream home. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "This," she held it up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This is the deed to the land I bought for us. But now, it's mine." For the first time all evening, Ethan looked shaken. You actually bought it?" "I did. And now it looks like you won't be enjoying it, will you?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. She had caught him off guard, and for once, he was the one who looked like he had lost something valuable. Hannah tucked the deed into her purse, grabbed her car keys, and turned to face him one last time. "You made your choice, Ethan. Now you get to live with it." And with that, she walked out the door, never looking back. The drive away from the apartment felt surreal. The city lights blurred past her windshield, but Hannah barely registered them. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind still replaying Ethan's words over and over. "I need someone who adds excitement to my life." His arrogance, his dismissal of everything she had given, everything she had built. It should have broken her. But instead, something inside her shifted. The shock was still there, raw and stinging, but beneath it, there was something else. Relief. For years, she had bent over backward, trying to make their relationship work, trying to be the version of herself that Ethan would finally appreciate. And yet, it had never been enough. Maybe it had never been about her at all. She pulled into the parking lot of Lena's townhouse, the one place she knew she wouldn't have to explain herself. Before she could even knock, the door swung open. Lena stood there, wearing sweatpants and holding a half-empty glass of wine, her dark eyes scanning Hannah's face. "What did he do?" she asked, her voice sharp with protective fury. Hannah let out a shaky breath. "Can I come in?" Lena stepped aside immediately. "Kitchen or living room?" "Kitchen," Hannah said, knowing Lena was already reaching for another glass. Minutes later, they were seated at the small kitchen table, the scent of lavender candles mixing with the warmth of freshly poured wine. Hannah stared at the deep red liquid, swirling it in slow circles as she gathered the words. And then, all at once it came out. The blueprint, the cruel words. Isabel, the way Ethan had dismissed her like an inconvenience he had finally grown tired of. By the time she got to the part about the land deed, Lena was sitting forward, her jaw clenched. "He called you boring after everything you've done for him?" Lena's voice rose in disbelief. "And then had the audacity to tell you he was leaving for some Instagram traveling 20-something? Are you kidding me?" Anna let out a dry laugh. "Nope, that's Ethan. Always so sure he's the smartest person in the room. And yet," Lena smirked, leaning back in her chair, "somehow you're the one with the house deed in your purse, and he's the one moving in with a girl who probably thinks budgeting is a type of yoga." For the first time that night, Hannah truly smiled. Lena reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Listen, I know this is awful right now, but one day, you're going to look back on this and realize Ethan leaving, that was the best damn thing that could have happened to you." Hannah exhaled, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Maybe Lena was right. Maybe this wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was the beginning of something better. She took another sip of wine, staring at the purse where the deed to her future rested. "Tomorrow," she said, setting the glass down, "I'm driving up to the land." Lena grinned. "Hell yes, you are." The road to the land was long and winding, stretching out into the countryside, far away from the suffocating city and the memories that haunted it. As Hannah drove, the weight on her chest gradually lightened, replaced by something unfamiliar. Anticipation? She had always pictured this moment differently, imagined coming here with Ethan, standing side by side as they marveled at their future. But now the land wasn't theirs. It was hers, and for the first time, she realized how much that mattered. When she arrived, she stepped out of the car, the crisp mountain air filling her lungs. The property sat on a gentle slope, overlooking a serene lake surrounded by towering evergreens. It was breathtaking, even in its untouched state. She walked slowly through the open space, envisioning where the house would stand, where the sun would spill into the windows in the morning, where she would drink coffee on the porch and watch the water ripple in the breeze. This wasn't just a piece of land, it was a fresh start. As she stood there letting the realization settle, she heard the sound of another car pulling up behind her. Lena. Of course. She had insisted on following later with snacks and celebratory drinks, despite Hannah's protests that she would be fine alone. Lena stepped out of the car, sunglasses perched on her head, grinning. "Holy hell, Hannah," she breathed, turning in a slow circle. "You bought this?" Hannah smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "Yeah." Lena whistled. "Damn, Ethan really fumbled the bag, huh?" She turned to face Hannah, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Can you imagine? He thought he was leaving you behind, and now he's stuck in some cramped apartment with a girl who probably makes him take selfies at brunch." Hannah laughed, shaking her head. "You really hate Isabel, don't you?" "I don't even know her," Lena said. "But I do know Ethan, and I know he's the kind of guy who will realize what he lost too late." She paused, glancing at Hannah thoughtfully. But that's not your problem anymore. Hannah exhaled, glancing at the land again. No, it wasn't her problem. Not anymore. They spread out a blanket and sat on the grass, sipping wine from travel cups while Hannah sketched in her notebook. The blueprint she had made for Ethan, the one she had once poured so much love into, was officially being reimagined for herself. I'm going to build it, Hannah said after a long silence. Lena looked up. The house? Yes. Maybe not as big as before, maybe not exactly the same, but I'm doing it. She tapped the page where she had begun to adjust the layout. This was never just for him. It was always something I wanted. Lena grinned, raising her cup. Then here's to your dream home and to the life Ethan will never get to be part of. As they clinked their drinks together, Hannah realized something. She wasn't just moving on, she was building something new, something better. And for the first time in a long time, she couldn't wait to see what happened next. Ethan had expected smooth sailing. He had imagined a life of excitement, of carefree adventures with Isabel, the 26-year-old travel blogger who made him feel young again. At first, things had seemed perfect. Weekend getaways, high-end restaurants, a whirlwind romance filled with Instagram-worthy moments, but reality hit him faster than he ever anticipated. For one, Isabel wasn't the doting, ever-attentive partner he had grown used to in Hannah. She wasn't the type to cook dinner and wait up for him or meticulously plan their future the way Hannah had. In fact, Isabel barely planned anything. She lived for the next trip, the next social media post, the next opportunity to escape routine. And Ethan was beginning to realize that he wasn't her priority. It started small. She would cancel plans at the last minute, jetting off to another country for a spontaneous content trip with her influencer friends. He would come home to an empty apartment, meals uneaten, messages unanswered. He found himself waiting for her, something he had never done before. The novelty of their relationship quickly wore off as he grew tired of always coming second to her wanderlust. Then the financial strain began to set in. Without Hannah's careful budgeting, Ethan was spending more than ever, trying to keep up with Isabel's expensive tastes, their nights out, the frequent getaways. But unlike Hannah, who had always quietly handled their finances, Isabel had no interest in stability. We'll figure it out, she'd say dismissively whenever he brought up money. But he was the one paying for everything, and his savings were disappearing fast. The final blow came one night when Ethan, already frustrated by Isabel's increasing distance, made the mistake of bringing up marriage. She had laughed, actually laughed, before shaking her head. "Oh, Ethan," she had said, shaking a perfectly manicured finger at him. "Did you actually think this was serious?" His stomach had twisted. "What do you mean?" "I mean, come on." She rolled her eyes. "We had fun, but did you really think we were forever? I'm not looking for some boring, settled down life. I have places to see, things to do." He had stared at her, speechless. The weight of his decisions, of what he had thrown away, crashed down on him all at once. The next morning, Isabel was gone. Ethan sat alone in his now half-empty apartment, the silence deafening. He reached for his phone, instinct taking over, before realizing there was only one person he wanted to call. Chano. His fingers hovered over her name in his contacts. Then, swallowing his pride, he sent her a message. "Can we talk?" But hours passed, and the only response he got was silence. Hannah didn't see Ethan's message until later that night, but when she did, she only stared at it for a moment before deleting it without responding. There was nothing left to say. Whatever regret he was feeling, whatever mess he had made of his life, it wasn't her responsibility to fix, not anymore. Instead, she turned her attention back to her laptop screen, where an email from an architecture firm she had admired for years was waiting for her response. They wanted her to collaborate on a new sustainable housing project, a career opportunity she never would have pursued if she had still been tied to Ethan's expectations. For years, she had put her own dreams on hold, making compromises, adjusting her ambitions to fit the life Ethan had dictated for them. He had always dismissed her ideas, calling her projects cute but unrealistic. She had once believed him, but now she could see it clearly. He had never wanted her to shine. The next morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She had work to do. She threw herself into her projects, accepting more independent contracts, working with clients who actually valued her creativity. For the first time in years, she wasn't designing for someone else's approval, she was designing for herself. She even started writing about her journey, sharing her experience of rebuilding her career, her confidence, and her life after walking away from the man who never saw her worth. To her surprise, people resonated with her story. One afternoon, as she sat on the partially completed patio of her new home, sipping coffee and reviewing project plans, Lena arrived with a bottle of wine and an excited glint in her eyes. Okay, don't freak out, Lena said, plopping down next to her. But a friend of mine forwarded one of your blog posts to someone in the industry, and now, well, let's just say people are noticing you. Hannah raised an eyebrow. Noticing me how? Lena grinned. How do you feel about public speaking? Hannah groaned, leaning her head back. That sounds terrifying. Lena ignored her protest. Because you just got invited to speak at a major architecture and design conference about women breaking into the industry. Hannah blinked. Wait, what? You heard me, Lena smirked. It's a huge deal, Hannah. This could take your career to an entirely new level. The old Hannah, the one who second-guessed herself, who shrank in the presence of men like Ethan, would have hesitated, would have found a reason to say no, but she wasn't that woman anymore. She looked out at the land, the house rising from the ground, a testament to her own resilience, her own vision. And then, with a deep breath, she turned back to Lena and smiled. Let's do it. It had been months since Ethan had last seen Hannah, but that didn't stop him from showing up unannounced. One evening, as she pulled into the driveway of her nearly finished home, she spotted his familiar car parked at the edge of the property. The sight of him standing there, hands in his pockets, looking less sure of himself than ever, sent a surge of unexpected satisfaction through her. She stepped out of the car, arms crossed, keeping her expression unreadable. What are you doing here, Ethan? He let out a nervous laugh, glancing around at the house under construction. I, uh, I wanted to see you. Hannah raised an eyebrow. For what? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't the smug, self-assured man she remembered. His suit looked slightly disheveled, dark circles lined his eyes, and for the first time in their history, he looked lost. Look, I made a mistake, he admitted. I was stupid, okay? I didn't appreciate you. I let something real slip through my fingers because I was chasing, I don't even know what. His voice softened. But I see it now. You were the best thing in my life, Hannah. She tilted her head slightly, observing him like he was an old artifact from a life she no longer recognized. And you think telling me this is going to change anything? Hannah, come on, he said, stepping forward. I know I hurt you. I know I screwed up. But I also know we were good together once. We could be again. He gestured toward the house. I mean, look at this. We dreamed of building something together, and you actually made it happen. She let out a slow breath and looked past him toward the home she had designed, not for him, but for herself. You're wrong, Ethan, she said, her voice steady. I dreamed of this. I made it happen. You left because you thought you could find something better, and now you're back because you realized you can't. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, she said, shaking her head. What wasn't fair was the way you dismissed me for years, the way you made me feel small, the way you thought you could replace me like I was nothing. And now you think I should just forget all of that? Ethan opened his mouth, but she wasn't finished. I don't need you, Ethan. I never did. And I'm not about to let you back into my life just because you finally understand what you lost. She gestured toward the road. So go. Whatever apology you came here with, I don't need it. For the first time ever, Ethan had nothing to say. He stared at her, struggling for words, but none came. And then, realizing there was nothing left to fight for, he turned and walked away. As Ethan's car disappeared down the road, Hannah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There was no sadness, no regret, no lingering ache, just peace. He was finally out of her life, not just physically, but emotionally. She had no desire to dwell on what could have been, because she knew now what could have been was never meant to be. She turned back toward her house, standing proudly against the backdrop of towering trees and the lake beyond. It was almost finished now, just a few final touches before it would be truly hers. Every beam, every window, every space had been designed by her, for her. It was proof that she had built something meaningful on her own. A year ago, she wouldn't have believed she was capable of this. Now she was living it. That night, as she settled into the living room with a glass of wine, her phone buzzed. Lena, please tell me you sent him packing. Hannah smirked, typing back. He left with his tail between his legs. I don't think he'll be back. Seconds later, her phone rang. I knew it, Lena cackled on the other end. Men like him always come crawling back when they realize they lost something good. Too bad for him, Hannah said, swirling her wine. I'm not interested in being someone's second choice. Lena hummed approvingly. So, what's next for the great and powerful Hannah? I feel like you need a celebration. Maybe a trip? Ooh, a solo vacation to Italy. You can drink wine, flirt with gorgeous men, and actually, Hannah interrupted, glancing at her laptop, I was thinking about preparing for the conference. A beat of silence. Then Lena practically shrieked. The conference? The one with all the fancy architects and industry bigwigs? That's the one. Lena let out a dramatic gasp. Who are you, and what have you done with my risk-averse best friend? Hannah laughed. She's chasing, or maybe she's just finally being herself. The architecture and design conference had seemed terrifying at first, but now it felt like a door she was ready to walk through. She had a story to tell, one about resilience, about finding her worth, about how she had turned heartbreak into opportunity. The weeks leading up to the conference were a whirlwind of preparation, excitement, and a few nervous jitters. But when the day finally came, as she stood backstage waiting for her cue, she realized something incredible. She wasn't afraid. The host introduced her, and she walked onto the stage, standing tall, the lights shining down on her. She took a deep breath, smiling at the audience. My name is Hannah, she began, and a year ago I never would have imagined standing here. I was stuck in a life I thought I had to fight for, a relationship that made me feel small, a career I was too afraid to fully embrace. But life has a funny way of showing you what you're capable of, if you're willing to take the leap. As she spoke, heads nodded, people leaned in, taking notes, listening. She wasn't just telling her story, she was inspiring others to rewrite their own. And that was when she knew this was only the beginning. Hannah's journey teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, resilience, and the importance of choosing yourself. For years, she poured her love, time, and energy into a relationship where she was unappreciated, believing that if she just tried harder, Ethan would finally see her value. But when he discarded her for something more exciting, she was forced to confront a truth she had long ignored. She was never the problem. Instead of crumbling, Hannah chose to rebuild. Not just her home, but her life. She reclaimed her dreams, embraced her talents, and proved that she was more than someone's backup plan. Her story reminds us that true happiness doesn't come from external validation, but from within. Ethan's downfall highlights another truth. Those who take others for granted will eventually face the consequences of their actions. He thought the grass was greener elsewhere, only to realize too late that he had destroyed something real. In the end, Hannah didn't just survive, she thrived. She walked away with confidence, success, and freedom, proving that sometimes the best thing that can happen is being forced to let go of what was never meant for you.